It's Leor Lovinger from Israel, from Tel Aviv. And I want to say some few things before letting Leor in and addressing his presentation. Leor has 23 years of experience in the field of landscape architecture and urban design. Leor is the founder and managing director of Studio URBANOF, a research-based design practice committed to innovative design of public spaces, urban resilience, and biophilic design. Over the past decade, he has taught and lectured internationally. Since 2013, he is acting as IFLA Europe's Green Infrastructure Director. And in 2016, he was appointed as an expert consulting the European Commission Eclipse on nature-based solution to support urban resiliency, IFLA Europe's representative. And prior to this, Leor studied, researched, and practiced in the United States for more than 8 years. His last position was senior associate with the office of Michael Val Valkenburg, we all know it. Leor holds a bachelor in landscape architecture, cum laude, from Technion Haifa, Israel, and a master's degree in landscape architecture from University of California, Berkeley. So, Leor, thank you very much for being our guest today. You are, since some years now, a friend of AsoP Romania. And if you had the occasion, you for sure come over and to deliver your presentation live. But this is the times that we live in, and we have to adapt. And this is online, but it's really nice that we can all be part of this really nice experience. And again, thank you. And the floor is yours, Leor.
So first of all, thank you for the presentation and for the honor. And yes, I mean, it is a weird time, and I obviously would have loved to come and visit your wonderful country, and I've been there several times. And I cherish the friendship of the IFLA of our organizations and also individuals. I'm sorry I missed the previous presentations, especially I heard great things about the last speaker's open fabric. And anyways, what I wanted to talk about in the short time that I have, and continuing the discussion about COVID-19, I think one thing that I look at during these challenging times is that the tension, the worries, the pressure, some feel it economically, some feel it financially in their homes, some socially. I see more aggressiveness, and we also see it in research, and we see it in the daily newspaper against women, against children. I would say even in our industry, I feel there are many more aggressive clients or in the construction industry. And I think that when you look at nature, and we talk about it, even when we talk about our children, we want to put them in an environment with nature, which makes us better people, which gives us more stability as individuals. So the talk that I'm suggesting, I prepared for today was to talk about our connection with nature and how we try to do that in our work. I will say that, you know, when I'm a secular, I'm not a religious person, but one of the things I take from the Bible, there's storytelling, and it was talked about King Solomon as being very wise and that he was able to speak to animals and birds. And I don't know why it may have affected that story, my belief in that. And forever I've been looking at birds as a means of looking. And you know, if we look through nature, or if we look even through the disabled in our communities, it could be blind or an elderly or someone that has other challenging individual issues, we can be more sensitive to our environment, can make us better people and better designers. So this image I shot in the Armenian Quarter in Old Jerusalem of two doves trying to get a sip of water in the cracks of the stone. So water and peace is two things that we miss here in our region. But and this view, I stepped out of the city hall of Beersheba, and it was a sandstorm. I'm looking face into the sandstorm, and you can see on this building over here, the pigeons are hiding behind the wall. I mean, when we look around us, this is in the boulevard in Tel Aviv at the crows, and you look about what they're looking at, how they're communicating. It opens our eyes in many aspects, and that is just a little preview because I will be talking about birds through the work. To take things for a moment, I have about 8 slides here of background, just of the concepts that I talk about, and this is a view of the mountain of my childhood in Montreal. I was born in Montreal. And this quote talks about biophilia, right? We possess an innate tendency to see connections with nature and other forms of life. And when we get to these places, then it has a huge impact on us. And when we look at New York, of course, there's this icon that we all know of Central Park, you know, and the outcrops there and the plants. And what very few people know and this image is from the construction of Central Park, and on the right, this tree moving machine. This is a drawing from Prospect Park, which was the second park that Olmsted did in New York. And that basically what we perceive as nature is man-made. There were 10 million barrels of rock and poor soil removed, and 14,000 cubic meters of soil from New Jersey, and 4 million trees that were brought into this park. So and this example from another iconic designer, the Israel award-winning prize for landscape architecture, Yalom Tzur, both have passed. One of them was my mentor, of how to create sort of an icon of nature, but man-made, and sort of give an answer to this desire of ours for a place. And this is in an open space. This is not in a city. But when we look at cities and we look at nature and what we're talking about, this image, this aerial is recently from Tel Aviv. The arrow here in the middle, this is our office. It's an old crappy building in the heart of the metropolis. And the question is, you know, where is nature in our cities these days with all the building that's happening? What is the future, and where is that nature that we so much need and desire? And for inspiration, these images of the work of both Niemeyer, Oscar Niemeyer, the architect, and Burle Marx. One of the things, Oscar Niemeyer was a brutalist, and his buildings were very harsh. If I look at the concrete in our cities and the harshness that we're challenged with, so Burle Marx brought the concepts of the jungle into buildings. I mean, he had to intervene in a way to stand against the brutalist architecture, or so it has to be a powerful enough idea. I also, in my career, had the opportunity to work for and with Larry Halperin during the time that the Yosemite was built. But his concepts and famous fountains, they're all about bringing the Sierra into cities. So concepts of nature and being brought in, sometimes as a metaphor and sometimes very physical. And lastly, the office in New York with Michael. So those outcrops that we saw in Central Park, basically they exist on all the north hemisphere of the United States, the northeastern hemisphere. It goes from, I think from upstate New York all the way down to Pennsylvania. And so these ideas of nature and how they're brought in are very critical to making these cities that we live in human, both in scale and both in texture and feel of nature. So I'm jumping ahead. In 2009, I returned to Israel. I gave a lecture at the university, and 2 marine biologists were there, and they were telling me that they were developing this concept of new concrete that is more ecological, and we became friends, and we started working together on different ideas, and then we submitted for the Savannah Ocean Exchange. It was a very famous competition that happens once a year for the solutions that are sustainable and that can open eyes of how to develop along the coast. And we came in second prize. They developed matrices of concrete of how basically to recruit biology. In other words, if we look at regular Portland concrete, the regular concrete we use, it has very high levels of pH. It burns everything that lives. And so they started developing a matrice of concrete that has crushed volcanic rock and organic material inside. And that is one thing I wanted to talk about. And the other is that the surface, the complexity of the surface, where there's more texture, it also recruits more biology. And so this is all their work, and credit to eConcrete. And on the lower two slides, you can see their applications in the ocean. And it's been very, very successful. And it's almost like if I were to take the equivalent of a tree, it's as if I would feed a tree with, each day would pour a can of Red Bull or some other energy drink into the tree pit. And so working with them, I was wondering if we can take some of those ideas and bring them onshore and develop something for plants on ground, just again, inspired by Burle Marx' concrete vertical gardens. And so I had a project, rooftop, 5th floor of a building in Tel Aviv, and we developed a tile. I developed with them a tile that is 30 by 30 centimeters, and we put it on one of the columns. Is 90 centimeters wide, 6 meters tall. It was a pilot project. The client played ball with us, and this is that roof garden recently photoed, and has a wall which is very successful, and that was the first pilot project. And that idea, later we competed with a well-known architectural office in Israel for the comptroller building in Jerusalem. And we suggested that the inner court, it's a very odd building because it's buried in a courtyard that you cannot see here. So we had to develop a very unique concept, and working with the architects, we suggested that the archive, where many people come on a daily basis, would be sitting in a garden, that this type of biological concrete unit would be basically the wallpaper for this garden. And eventually we also built it. And that was the first time we built this material. And working with the marine biologists, we kept developing further ideas, for instance, of pockets to plant in. And then there's this urban project in Tel Aviv, same Tel Aviv that I showed you before. It's a building by a well-known and very much appreciated architect in Israel, like Idi Baourian. And the building is very much like a European one. It has shops all around, and then there's an entry court, and we'll see it in a minute. This is the form of this courtyard. It has 3 lobbies and 70 tenants in the building. And so here you can see what I was explaining before. There's shops and retail all the way around, an entrance to the courtyard. And the courtyard, I'm going to go one slide back with your permission. This is the southern edge. And so when we open it up to the south and we get the sun, the afternoon sun, we basically can work with the Mediterranean palette. We get the sun, we get the plants. And you can see a bit more of that. And we're actually working with this is someone would identify more as a Mediterranean around Nice, Monte Carlo, and less hardcore Mediterranean. It's a bit more lush, and I will talk about that in a minute. But the idea of this courtyard is that all along the long wall of it, we put up this wall. And what I didn't describe earlier, and I will in a minute, let me see one slide. No, I will get to that in a minute. But these 30 by 30 centimeter tiles, if I dip them in a bucket of water and I lift them when they stop dripping, they actually hold a half a liter of water. So if I put an irrigation pipe hidden here and I turn it on in the morning, it basically drips on the wall, and the wall then becomes a cooling block. In Israel, we have a very hot summer 35 to 40 Celsius almost on a daily basis. So the idea is that on one hand, of course, there's the beauty that we try to achieve. On the other, there's the biology of it. So one of the things that we work with the architect and the client, all the apartments have the same air conditioning unit, and they're all placed in the same place, and all the water is collected and reused for the gardening and for the water element that we have in the court. And these are the tiles that I was telling you about. I was telling you guys about, and this is the drip line that's at the top of the wall. And these are the pockets that we developed and that are embedded in this wall. This is another view of that. But what I wanted to really show is that it recruits a lot of biology. There's a lot of mosses and lichens and vegetation that grow on these walls because of the organic and the patented concrete matrix. But one of the things about the marine biologists, they also conducted research here in the court. And we put up monitoring of temperature on the wall, in the court, and outside the court, on the street. And apparently this wall brings a different climate into the court. The delta on a daily basis could go anywhere between 3 to 13 degrees Celsius. That means this courtyard could be cooler, almost 13 Celsius, less than what's happening on the street. We've also been doing research. We've also been doing research on plants to see really what type of plants. Just one second. Sorry. We've been conducting different types of studies on plants to see what would work in this court. And it's been a breakthrough. The court has been appreciated both in terms of climate, in terms of ecology. And in one of the recent visits, a couple of years back, we had a group from Milan, and we found this, we call it the tor. It's a bird that's disappearing from our cities because it doesn't have any habitat. And so it was a small circle that we closed by seeing this bird nesting in one of our pockets. And the project received awards. It's been presented in Paris and in New York at the Design Festival. And the material itself now is the same material that they're using in New York to build resiliency into these coastal areas. So it's the same material. The next project I wanted to talk about is a public building that we've done in Jerusalem, a very unique roof. Just one second. Going here. Going back, I had a problem with the presentation here. So this map is a map of the open spaces of Jerusalem. It's a master plan for the open spaces in the city. And the red dot is where our building is located. So Jerusalem, there's much thought of the valleys that come into the city. There are also the drainage basins. And there are also ecological corridors. So this was realized. And the building that, when it was decided on making this building, which is the Mandel Foundation for Leadership, it's right near, I'll show you in the picture, this is the Jerusalem Botanical Gardens. And it was positioned in the valley. So as a decision for a building, it was a very controversial decision to allocate the building in a valley, which was disturbed. One must say it was disturbed. But the idea, and this is a drawing by the American architect that designed this building, Michael McKinnell, who also did the Boston City Hall, and he actually sadly passed away last year from COVID-19. But the concept for this building was that it sits within a restored valley that flows through, and we were looking at the roof because it's a roof that is very much visualized and it can be seen from all over. And one of the concepts that we came up with, and we took a consultant from the Nature Conservancy, and we had an idea that we will make a living roof. Living roof or what we call brown roofs, are roofs that you don't irrigate and the plants on them are local. And so what you basically do, you peel off soil from a site restored, or a site that's going into construction, terra rossa, the type of soil, and you basically put it up on the roof. And this is an example in Jerusalem for a bird observatory that exists for years. So you get perennials and all kinds of different native plants during the year, and it's dry during the season. It creates isolation, which allows for less air conditioning. It has many values in it. But when you look at the roof, it's extensive. It's an extensive roof. It's between 10 to 20 centimeters only of soil. And it's this one is 2,300 square meters, which makes it the largest, at least in the Middle East, the close Middle East, and some say in the Mediterranean, but I cannot attest for that. One of the things working with the ecologists, we worked with not only with the local soil, but also brought in biological furniture, which is pruned branches and rocks and hollow decaying tree trunks. We worked with geophytes, all local, basically worked, as I said, with lists of local plants and guided by ecologists and also bird specialists. So seeds and annuals. This is the planting plan, which looks a lot like Jackson Pollock painting. With the experience that I gained working on green roofs over the years, especially at the office of Valkenburg in New York, is that in roofs, because of the exposure to south, north, wind conditions, sometimes even a 20 centimeter wall can create a very different condition along the edge of it. So we perceive usually on roofs like this a very Darwinistic approach. In other words, we spread the plants equally, the ones that we find that are both in the depth of the soil and the type of exposure. And we let nature do its thing, so that over time, plants that are good in one areas can succeed and others in other areas. So this was the plan. And to apply such a complex plan, we set up a grid. And you know, the grid, basically after we do all the isolation and the testing of water on the roof, we bring in, the sections are very simple sections. Anybody who's done a green roof knows that the drainage mats and the different layers, they're very, very simple. It's very low tech in what it does. And this is the soil that we're bringing from the mountains of Jerusalem, spreading it out on the roof. And then sea squills, Drima maritama, we had 2,000 of those planted on the roofs. It's a dramatic plant, we'll see in a minute. And one thing to say about these projects is that to do type of projects like this, you know, these are gardeners that work, you know, for the city hall, they do municipal and private gardens. They're used to doing regular gardening. They have very little familiarity with these type of bulbs and seeds. And so we've been there throughout almost every day, showing them how to plant, you know, bulbs. You can plant easily the other way around if you're not familiar. Sedums. These are sedums, natural sedums from sites that are going into construction in Jerusalem. So we collected sedums and transplanted them to the roof. And these are the first, after the first rain, we had the first rain exactly, October 2019 is when we completed construction, just before the first rains. And we can see here after one of the major rains, the roof can hold about almost 500 cubic meters of water, can contain up to 500 cubic meters of water on the roof. So it's also very substantial in terms of water retention, in terms of water management. And obviously it makes it a very natural system, right? When nature allows the rain, then we see what happens in the spring, and this is all natural. There was no intervention after the planting. In other words, there's no irrigation, no maintenance. These are views in the early spring. The roof was, the the schedule for the roof was planned so that it would work with weather, so that we would be there for the first rains, and the rest of the project was completed later on. And these are the first images of spring, flowerings on the roof. There's much evidence of birds on the roof, not only the crow that you can see here. On YouTube, there are several movies that the bird specialist put on. But we see a lot of activity on the roof. And the sea squirrels, you can see them, they just came out in July, last July. And you can tell some of them get up to almost 2 meters high. This is the bird specialist and director from the Nature Conservancy, who's a major partner in the project. The last project before I finish is a bit out of the city, but I thought that in the context of these projects, it was good to show a small urban scale, a medium level scale, and then talk about another larger scale intervention. This is a bird park in the center of Israel, in Emek Hefer. What we see in the image is these were fish pools, which is an agricultural practice that is slowly disappearing because it's not economic. And you know, Israel is, because of the Great Rift, Africa's Great Rift, which passes along the border between Israel and Jordan and Syria, is a major bird migration. All the birds coming from Romania, they come here, they fly through here. Even when there's COVID, they fly through Israel. And so we have some major sites that attract birds. And Emek Hefer, this area is an agricultural valley. If you want to center yourself, for those who know a bit about Israel, then Haifa is somewhere up here and Tel Aviv is somewhere down here. And so this is the Alexander River. And in this valley, there are many pools that collect stormwater from the rivers and the streams, and they basically feed the agricultural valley. This is our site. And 46% of all the land use in this area is of aquatic and water bodies, which makes it a great potential for birds. And we actually have a lot of birds coming through here. And up until recently, because the weather now is also so crazy because of climate change, we've had migrating birds in Israel up until 2 weeks ago. So this was the plan that we suggested. It includes a phase B, which didn't happen yet. The river goes all the way past the border into the Palestinian areas, which unfortunately don't have enough infrastructure, and so a lot of the water coming downhill is polluted. So part of the work, first of all, obviously there is common work done between Israel and the Palestinians to address the environmental issues and better their life in terms of, I would say this, hoping that there will be much more of that. But what we're trying to do is collect the water, pump it up through a wetland and bring it back to improve the water quality of the river. But in general, we've planned this obviously with a whole team of water specialists, of bird specialists, of ecologists. So we have different situations. We minimized, because there were already values of ecological values here, we tried to minimize the earthworks. We also saw that for the future, it was good for further generations to know that this area was indeed fishing pools, and to keep some of its authenticity of the site. Here what you can see is the high level of the levels of ecology. The darker the red is, the higher the values. And accordingly, the level of intervention of development. One interesting thing that we did with the pools in the dry season is we've done some earthworks on the bottom of these pools. And the idea was to create different levels, different depths of water, because each depth of water carries different vegetation and different birds and plants and species. And so that was done throughout the site. And the site was completed 2.5 years ago. We've designed also the buildings, the bird observatories, and the idea here, I don't remember if I put this in the slide, yeah. A disappearing type of book that maybe the current generation knows less is Neufeld. Neufeld is the German standards for building, and they talk about the dimensions of the human body and what we need. And we analyzed Neufeld and wanted to make sure that if a small kid or someone disabled in a chair, or if a professional birdsman come, they all have their windows and everybody can enjoy. So, so the design that we've seen previously is evolved from an idea that talks about the need of the people that are visiting, and then how people use it is one of the fascinating things. And I must say, great pleasure to see how different people come and how they interact both with the site and with nature. And this, by the way, is 30 minutes a drive from Haifa, Tel Aviv. So that means there's about 2.5 to 3 million people can live 30 minutes from here. So when we talk about making nature accessible to people in the city, it's a small drive out. I know that in Romania there are wonderful places. You can go 30-minute drive and you can be out in nature, and all of you know that how important that is as a quality of life. And obviously it looks different different times of the year. These images were taken 7 months after the park was completed. So we even had a flamingo visit here, and there is a research center, a bird research center. Wonderful guy, this guy here in the middle, Shai, who he has a Facebook page if anybody will want the information. So it's called the Friends of Agmon Hefer on Facebook, and a lot of the research that he does is there, and a lot of the images that I'm showing people put up. But it's also a place where once a year there's an event to take birds that have been either hurt or ill and release them back to nature. And everything is this. There's also monitoring, so we can tell there are birds coming from Hungary and from Russia, and some of them come back almost every year now. Last few slides. This bird is called Firea. It's a rare bird. For years, if someone would say they saw Firea in the south, there's a lake in southern Israel, people will wake up at 6 in the morning just to see them. And now there are 3 couples that are nesting in the park. So it's really been an ecological boost, exponentially in terms of nature. And I think lastly, you know, these type of moments, I think, are one of the exciting moments of our profession and what we can do and how we can really bring both nature and humans to one place, and they can both live in a symbiotic way. And this image is taken a month ago at sunset. So that's it, and thank you for listening, and thank you for inviting me to talk.
Thank you, Leor, for your presentation. Truly inspiring, as always. Thank you. So what we understand is that cities and landscapes, in order to develop, we need to find new ways to see, design, and build them, you know, and to commit more time and resources towards research, development, and innovation. And what I like is that you at URBANOF are really set on innovative project, and this I like this biophilic design. I mean, do you see this as something which is now, let's say, fashionable, or do you really think that people understood the role of nature in our environment, in our urban context? I mean, to go back to nature and to find their let's say code, and to use that in our planning process. So when it comes to this biophilic design, how do you feel this will evolve later?
Well, I think the challenges of the last decade, especially the climate change and other, I mean, the COVID-19, I think, is also, many people are talking it as part of the climate change and the challenging times that we're living, there is a growing knowledge for the need for these places and for what they do to us and how we need them, how much we need them for our healthy and happy way of living. So I would say that in our office, there's not one project that you will not find these values. It could be, as I said, it could be a small courtyard and it could be a huge park. I truly believe when I think of my kids, you know, and it's so easy to get caught into computers and the mobile phones. The need to go out to nature, the need to engage nature, trees and hills and water, they're basics. And if we can bring these as close as we can to our homes and our working places, then the better we are.
Okay. I know one question is coming from our viewers. It's about Jane Hutton, that has a very nice concept to talk about how landscapes are connected through flows of construction materials, timber, stone, metals. The concept of reciprocity. I was wondering if you are familiar with it and what is your comment on it. Reciprocity conceives a reciprocal relations between the landscapes that are connected as such, to give something back while you take from it. So can you imagine a more reciprocal global culture?
I definitely am familiar. I think that it's consistent with what I've been talking about, even though I haven't been speaking about it as a point of focus. I think site-specific design is something that is definitely something important to talk about. And there are places that the timber is a major part, and some the brick. But these places where we use resources, there are ways to give back. And I think if once we looked at nature as or areas that we would refer to as natural, many of them would be disturbed sites that we perceive as nature because they're either neglected or they haven't been developed. But the general approach, and this I think I've also through my studies at Berkeley and the work in the US, I would say that we take a very progressive approach, a very proactive approach in how to empower or how to engage nature into our work and how to work with local materials and local plants, which I think was very evident in what I showed before. So yes, I think it's a very strong concept, and I think it lives side by side with the stuff that I've been talking about. You're on mute.
Yeah, I saw it. It's very hard to familiarize with this kind of system, but because you showed us a lot of projects dealing from a very small scale to this extra large scale, which is our topic of this panel. And I know that you have like a really good recipe in order to address these projects. How many specialists work to contribute or to an inclusive design project? I mean, what makes these projects work, make them complex, make them understandable for the authorities? Because at a certain point, we go with all this nice colored and researched and designed the projects to the authorities. If they don't understand nothing, then it's a work in vain.
Yeah, I think first of all, on behalf of the architect, the landscape architect, the designer, the first thing is you have to have modesty. You have to have professionalism in what you do, but modesty of all the things that you do not know. I'm not a bird specialist and I'm not an ecologist, and to achieve projects like this, I must work hand by hand with these specialists. I would say there were some projects in our office that I took from my own salary and I paid them because the client didn't find the need for them. And I think you talked about a very good point, because many clients do not appreciate or do not want to pay. You say, well, I won't take an ecologist. Next thing you want also a lighting specialist, or you'll want something else. some other consultant. And I think that it's a bit like if you're not a very rich person and you have a salary and you have expenses, you have to decide where you put your money and where you put your efforts. And I try many times to target the project so that the client invests the money in the right places. And one of them is in paying the right consultants so that the project will achieve what its full potential. So it's not always that easy, but it's none of these projects would succeed if we were on our own, URBANOF. We need all the strong consultants that we work with, and I think that there's also something about when you make a successful project that has many fathers and mothers, many partners that are part of this. When you fail, you're always alone. Architect always to blame when it fails, but when it succeeds, there are many fathers of or mothers of success.
I agree. Okay, thank you very much, Leor. Let's see if
thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here.